I remember when I first started riding motorcycles, we had one option for a small sport bike, and it was the Ninja 250. The ugliest small displacement sport bike I had ever seen in my life. And we didn't even have cool small displacement motorcycles like this Honda Grom. But in 2012, Kawasaki introduced the Ninja 300. And in 2015, Yamaha gave us the R3. And not long after that, we had the Ninja 400 and more recently the ZX4RR. One of the most anticipated small displacement sport bikes in the US since forever. Now, I know there's like old 400cc sport bikes in the past, those like the CBR 400RR, Honda's NSR 400, and all those other heavy old sport bikes. Like, how long are we gonna keep bringing up these old ass sport bikes? It's 2023. All you dad bods are getting old. You're not reliving your glory days. There's a new age of small displacement sport bikes, and that's what we're talking about today.
Imagine beginning your motorcycle journey in the mid to late 2000s, and you had two options, 600cc, 1000cc, or you could start with a beginner sport bike, the 250 Ninja. I guess that's three options. I have to commend Kawasaki for that one. They were the only beginner sport bike option if sport bikes were your flavor. But I think back then a lot of us felt the same way about the 250. It was an ugly bike, and back then everybody was riding 600s. I don't think there was as many people riding 1000cc's back then, solely because, hey, it's 1000cc. That is a very scary thing, especially to start on as a new motorcycle rider. Now, I'm not saying people haven't done it, because obviously they have. All I'm saying is maybe if we had options back then that some of these kids do now, maybe a lot of us who are against these small displacement motorcycles wouldn't be so against them. See, I think in a way, what Kawasaki is doing with the ZX4R is saving motorcycles. More specifically, saving super sports. Now, I'm not talking super sports as in 600 versus 1000. The barrier of entry for this sport is a lot easier. Now, there's this saying going around that 600cc's are dead or they're dying, and I think part of that is a lot of people don't need to go 100, 150 in the streets. I think we can all agree that kids these days are built different. They have access to things like the internet. They're not as easily influenced by their friends who may be riding 600cc's. There's a lot more of us influencers who are saying 600cc's are too much for the street. That's such a weird statement to me, because again, when I first started, you didn't have much of a choice. You either picked the Ninja 250 or you were on a 600cc. And if you did start on a 600cc as a beginner, the choices were pretty slim. I think we can all agree that some of the best choices were like the Gixxer 600 or the CBR 600RR as a new rider. These days you got like the Ninja 400, the R3, the RC390. You even have upright bikes, right? They're naked versions. The MT-03, the Z400, and even BMW has a 300 that's an upright naked. All great beginner sport bikes. Now, I don't personally think the Grom is a beginner sport bike. I think the Grom is a different genre on its own, but technically you could start on a Grom. You could start in this community, and this could open the door to maybe like a 600cc or even a 750 or right up to an S1000RR. I think without this segment of small, light, semi-powerful sport bikes, the interest for bigger bikes like the 600cc's or the 1000cc's would be lower. Not everybody wants to start on a 600. Not everybody wants to start on a 750. I know when I talk to some of these car kids, they'll say things like, man, I've always wanted to ride a bike, but I don't want to die. Now, as motorcycle riders, we know the possibility of death is just one of those things you should accept as a rider. It doesn't matter if you ride a 600, a 1000, a 300, but I think to somebody who's like 18, 19, 20, being able to do like 100, 120, 150 on the highway on a sport bike, that can be extremely scary. I mean, think about it. Not everybody is an adrenaline junkie like us. Think of motorcycles like a ladder. Back then, we had the 250, right? That's the first step. And then the next jump was a 600. And then the next jump was 1000. Yes, there was the Gixxer 750 in between. And part of the reason a lot of people love that bike so much is because it was the in-between of a 600 and 1000. There was no true in-between super sport of the 250 and the 600. There was a hole right here that was missing for years. And I'm going to reiterate again, yes, in the late 80s and early 90s, they had 400 400s, but they got rid of them. But that's what makes this new class of sport bikes so important now. These small displacement sport bikes are keeping the sport alive. And no offense to those Harley or Cruiser guys, but you won't hear a lot of people say, I could die riding a Harley. Because let's face it, it's a fucking recliner on wheels. Like, how intimidating is the word cruiser versus things like the super sport or super bike? 200 horsepower, 100 miles an hour in first gear. That is extremely intimidating to somebody who has never ridden a sport bike. There's a lot of bikes out today. This thing's so fun, man. It's like, it's so slow, but it's so damn fun. I love riding this little Grom, dude. I think I am gonna sell it though. I know it's supposed to be my son's, but he's still 3 years away, man. He's still 3 years away. There's some stuff I want to do. Let's see if this place is open. I need some coffee. Yes, they are open. Hell yeah. Gee whiz, look at this beautiful 125cc. It's been fun mobbing on this thing. I haven't ridden this in a minute. It's been the RSV4 like non-stop. Still, I love this color. I had a black one back then, but this yellow, this is the one I wanted. Oh, that's fucking sick. There must be some kind of a car meet or something. Look at these.
See, here's the thing that a lot of people forget. Even me, myself. 600 cc's, 1000 cc's are homologated race bikes. 600s for World Supersport, 1000s for World Superbike. And a lot of people get this mistaken all the time. The bikes that we ride on the streets aren't super bikes. Even big motorcycle review channels, they have their superbike shootout, but even those are not super bikes. And a lot of Europeans always get mad about this for some reason. The world has adopted the term superbike and supersport to refer to 600cc and 1000cc sport bikes. You can't really get mad if like even big magazines or big YouTube channels are calling them super bikes. Really, they're closer to super stock than they are super bikes. Super bikes are heavily modified, super stocks have a limited modification list. And it's the same for super sports, the 600cc's. It's part of the reason the R6 is now race only. For Yamaha to compete in World Superbike, they have to sell the 600cc's to the public. Nobody ever said they had to be street legal, but they have to sell a certain amount to the public. And what's great about these small bikes is they're not race bikes. Yes, there are junior race divisions that do use the smaller cc motorcycles, but I'm talking about the small cc sport bikes that are honestly way better for the streets. 600cc was the go-to street bike back then, but now we got smaller cc bikes that somebody like me who rides 600s and 1000s all day long would consider the better street bike. So here's some final thoughts on small displacement sport bikes. After giving it some thought, I definitely find myself on the wrong side of this conversation. Thinking about where I started my motorcycle journey, I realized there wasn't many options. Again, it was the Ninja 250 or any of the 600s. If there was an option to say get a ZX4R or like a Yamaha R3 and even the Ninja 400, there's a possibility that I could have started on any of those three. I realize now the importance of small cc motorcycles. Those bikes are really keeping this sport alive. The fact that it makes it easier for some young people who are interested in riding motorcycles, more specifically sport bikes, is extremely important to our sport. Now, I'm definitely one of the first to admit that riding around town on a 1000cc in first, second, and third gear is extremely pointless. But I think we've gotten in our heads, at least for people like me, that we're missing out on a buttload of fun if we don't ride at minimum a 600cc. Slow bike fast is becoming more and more popular. Hell, even the Honda Groms are being raced at the tracks. The ZX4R definitely deserves more respect than it's being given by people like me who are too stubborn to see that 1000cc's or even 600cc's are a little overkill for the street. That's not to say I'm gonna pick up the ZX4R because the price for me is what's killing it. But I think that leaves a lot of room for somebody like Honda or Yamaha to come out with a cheaper option. I would love to see a CBR 400RR or even a Yamaha R4, and who knows, maybe in the near future the 400s are gonna be the new 600s. It's really weird for me to say that, but again, this segment of sport bikes, the 300s to 400s, is very important in terms of keeping sport bike life alive. If emissions is really killing the 600cc segment in all other countries except the United States, because us Americans think the world revolves around us, then a 400cc class is not such a bad thing. But I would love to hear your thoughts.